So my name is Shana Rappaport. I have the pleasure of serving as the Vice President and Executive Director of our VERGE event with GreenBiz Group. Couple of housekeeping items before we dig into today's conversation on regenerative business. This session is being recorded. We're going to archive it and make it available after the event. Amanda Joy Ravenhill, one of our speakers, is also going to be doing a sketch note and putting together a LinkedIn post sharing a lot of the resources that we're going to be discussing today. So keep your eyes out for that. And also, since we can't be together in person, please use the chat box. We'd love to know now, for those of you who haven't yet introduced yourselves, who are you? Where in the world are you coming from? And also throughout the session, as questions arise for you, please use the chat box. I'll be scanning it in real time, pulling out a couple of questions for us to get to at the end. And I'm also going to be sharing some resources in the chat in real time as Amanda and Ahmed speak to examples and various resources. I'll be sharing links to those as well. And a final plug at the end of the session, you'll see pinned at the top is a link to our survey. Please make sure to take that at the end. We so value your feedback and we read every single word. So with that quick flow, how this is going to work, we're going to start with a quick high kind of grounding discussion on regenerative business. What is it? Amanda's going to start by kind of level setting some of the core principles of regeneration within the context of the circular economy. Ahmed is going to share about some of the initiatives that NUMI T that's putting those principles into practice. And again, at the end, we'll weave in some of the questions that you all bring into the conversation. So with that, the focus of this session is really about the opportunity to move beyond sustainability and beyond, in the context of the circular economy, beyond just designing out waste and really towards truly regenerative businesses, regenerative products, and regenerative economies. And regeneration is often talked about as a core principle of the circular economy, and it certainly needs to be. But what does it truly mean to be a regenerative business? Regeneration means so many different things to so many different people. In many ways, it's at risk of becoming a buzzword like sustainability has in many ways. And for that reason, I am delighted to introduce our two speakers for today's conversation who are here to help demystify this question and bring it to life with real world examples. Amanda Joy Ravenhill is the co-founder of Project Drawdown and the executive director of the Buckminster Fuller Institute. And Ahmed Rahim is the CEO and co-founder of NUMI T. So in just a minute, I'm going to ask them to riff on this question. But first, I want to ask you all to do so and share your responses in the chat. What is your understanding or definition of regenerative business? So take a moment to think about that. And please do share your responses. Maybe we'll be able to weave in and address those throughout. But first, Ahmed, thank you so much for being with us, particularly as fires are raging across the region. We almost thought you weren't going to be able to make it today due to lack of Wi-Fi. So thank you so much for making it work to be here. I would love, in a minute, how do you orient to regeneration and what it means to be a regenerative business?
And thank you, Amanda, for being my partner in this. And you know, I look at regenerative as sort of the 2.0, 3.0 of what sustainability is. It's really how do we see the future in the present moment now, because we are constantly regenerating and we're constantly thriving to leave this planet and ourselves healthier, and similar to the generations of our families that have gone through so many periods of wounds, and I come from, you know, Mesopotamia, Iraq, and all those wounds, and what do the future generations look like? And the same with this planet. How do we create a healthy planet? And as a manufacturer and as a human, everything we do and everything I do and the moment I wake up is the responsibility for the future, to leave this planet and leave the people healthier than when I first encountered it. So I see the future is always now in regeneration. And it is a tricky word like sustainability because there's so many meanings. And for me, it's just, it's creating healthy, thriving ecosystems. And that's for everything that lives on this planet and for the galaxy at large.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ahmed. And Amanda, I'm going to pass it to you. I'm seeing one comment in from J.A. Ginsburg about how regeneration speaks to systems that create enduring abundance. And that certainly makes me think of you and your orientation, Amanda Joy.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining us today. Buckminster Fuller said that the universe is eternally regenerative. So I see it as the base state of nature, of which we are part and parcel, not apart from. And the thing about that is that we've been trained to see nature through a mechanistic lens, through just seeing it as different components that kind of work in, like a machine kind of way with cogs and wheels and inputs and outputs. And it's far more complex and far more gorgeous than we've been taught. So the tricky thing with regeneration is that we are all kind of remembering and tuning into what a lot of indigenous people have practiced for millennia, which is living in right relationship with nature as nature. And so sometimes we look at a forest and it looks like it's actually, based on competition for sunlight, but it's, far more complex and beautiful than that. So I'd like to just encourage everyone that regeneration is, it's a journey, not necessarily a destination, and invite everyone to bring in humility so that we don't over greenwash it and then by accident kind of make the word more diffuse or less meaningful. Yeah, so that's what I like to chew on when I think of the definition of regeneration.
Thanks, Amanda, and thank you all for sharing yours. So with that, to kind of take it from up here or maybe down here and build on it with some real principles, Amanda, so much of your work, particularly now with the Buckminster Fuller Institute, has been about orienting the world to the real principles of regeneration. So I'd love to pass it over to you to take 5 or so minutes to level set some really core principles of regenerative business.
Of course. Yeah, so I'd like to focus on 2 principles. One is this idea of nature-inspired design. And the second one is about increasing the health of every system that we touch. So, the nature-inspired design, when you look at it through a circular economy lens, I think we're all familiar with this idea of, in nature, waste equals food. So the waste from one living organism equals the food for some other living organism. And so many people, of over 10,000, right, Shana, that are part of Circularity 20 now, are working on this economy of kind of repurposing and ensuring that all waste can be recovered and turned back into new materials or upcycled. And at Buckminster Fuller Institute, we like to talk about this idea of the circularity, this moment, kind of like the singularity, the circularity, a moment in which all products are either made by something that's recovered from past products, or they're made by something that's grown regeneratively. And so grown regeneratively in a way that balances the carbon cycle, balances the water cycle, also works with local cultures, and increases the health of every system, which brings us on to that second principle. So increasing the health of every system that we touch, I think often within the circular economy conversation, there's a lot of focus on supply chain and materials. And in order to be a truly regenerative business, we need to be looking across all scales. So how are we improving the health of all of our employees? How are we improving the health of all of the communities that we're working with? And not just kind of, improving incrementally, but actually improving the capacity or the capability of the systems that we work with so that they can hold more health and, create health that ensures more health kind of comes down in the wake. So those are the 2 principles: nature-inspired design and this idea of waste equals food, and then increasing the health of every system we touch. So grounding that in some examples, the Buckminster Fuller Institute, we have been holding a challenge program every year to find kind of Buckminster Fuller-esque projects. He was very much driven by nature's design. The geodesic dome, which he's most known for, is a expression of this idea of doing more with less, and nature-inspired design. So one of our challenge winners familiar, it's like LEED, green building, certification process, but living buildings are just that. They are living and they're increasing ecosystem services of which they're a part of. So they're being a net positive to nature. And that's a good example of the nature-inspired design principle. A resource that you can use to kind of ask yourself, how would nature design communities or supply chain or whatever it is that you're working on. There's a great website called asknature.org. I'm one of the advisors. It's with the Biomimicry Institute. And you can go on and ask and explore, how ant colonies perform and get inspiration for your organizational design, and really kind of bring the full idea of the circular economy to every aspect of the design of your business. For the second principle of increasing the health of every system we touch, I would like to use the example of GreenWave, which is another winner of the Buckminster Fuller Institute Challenge. And they increase the health of so many different systems by doing a zero input ocean farming. So they grow kelp and other seaweed with shellfish in a way that requires zero inputs, but actually just uses the local nutrients. And in doing so, it deacidifies the local ocean. That kelp can sequester up to 5 times more carbon than terrestrial or land-based plants. Creates habitat for local fish and other wildlife, and then also recreational area for humans. So it's, creating kind of this, this model for fishermen also who've been, part of this exploitative economy of, overfishing, to have a new way of living in which they can increase the health of every system that they touch. And so a resource for that, for learning more about that kind of regenerative business, is Carol Sanford. She has several different books on regenerative business and regenerative enterprise, and then also Regenesis Group. They have a really great video series that tells you about the story of place and context and all of these different elements of regeneration. So just to recap, nature-inspired design, increasing the health of every system that we touch, the Living Building Challenge as an example, and Ask Nature as a resource, and then GreenWave as a great example of increasing the health of every system, and Carol Sanford and Regenesis as the resources there. So grateful to be a part.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And Ahmed, I'm so honored to now pass it to you, Amanda. That was a great kind of level set on some of the principles. I've shared a number of resources here in the chat. And Ahmed, I'd love to pass it to you. The work, the depth and breadth of the work that you all are doing at NUMMI spans so deeply across these principles and so many more of regeneration. Talk about how this is coming to life and what your learning journey has been so far, as a company that's so deeply committed to regeneration.
Yeah, thanks, Shana. And I think when you get to a place somewhere in your journey, as Amanda said, it's not about the destination, but constantly the journey. We know every day we can have a positive impact on all of our decisions that create these positive ripples on the planet and the people we touch. So we at NUMMI try and look at it from within, and also what we can do both globally and through our whole industry and through the relations we build. Because for us, it's about the long term beyond what we even know is existence in our life and in the lives of the future generations. And so from the NUMMI Inc. side, we try and look at, obviously, what are we doing as a manufacturer and a large agricultural, where we're dealing with some of the most poorest communities and indigenous cultures in countries that are being devastated right now by global warming, with fires and hurricanes and droughts, and whether it's South Africa, Madagascar, India, China, Egypt. So we're always dealing with all these various issues. So supporting our farmers is one of our main, because those are really our heroes, and the people that bring us everything that we can deliver into a bag of tea and a box for people to enjoy. So how do we take care of them, from education to health to wages to all kinds of systems within their supply chain, so that if there are big disasters like we see more and more these days, that they can overcome it. And obviously, you know, there's staples like organic and non-GMO that we don't compromise with any of that. So we really stay true to the planet and the people along the way. And also, you know, on the NUMI Foundation side, you know, we've started on a global and a local measure. We're on a global level. We launched something called Together for Hope, H2OPE, which is bringing over 15,000 of our organic farmers and their families clean water. Many of them never had access to clean water. So from there, we would dig wells in Madagascar where our turmeric is grown, and these people were drinking dirty river water for generations. So giving them access to just simple, clean water, a basic necessity of human life, is something that transformed the whole community into happiness. Going there over a 6-month period from the beginning to the end and seeing these people just become alive and happy and healthy, that they can actually do what they need to do to just live a normal life and not have to walk 4 or 5 miles a day just to fetch water 3 times a day. And that we expanded that obviously in Egypt, South Africa, and China. And now with this COVID, you know, we were in the NUMI Foundation, we've developed curriculums to provide inner city children, some of the poorest here in the Bay Area, with more Waldorf inspired type of education through gardening, art, and real social studies, experiential learning. And with COVID, we pivoted. We were serving around 20,000 inner city children, and we pivoted to the homes. And over the last 2 months, 3 months, we've now been feeding over 8,000 families with fresh deliveries of organic produce. And now we've expanded that to the elders here in Oakland and Richmond and Marin. So for us, we try and look at what's local in our backyard, like the children and the inner city families that are very poor, that don't have access to much, to our farming communities. And the other power I feel that we have as a choice to create positive impact through the ripples is through our industry. About 8-9 years ago, I started an organization with my partner, Laura, and it's called OSC Squared, One Step Closer to an Organic Sustainable Community. And that brought together about 35 of the I think, big beacons of sustainability brands like the Guayakis and Dr. Bronner's and Nutivas and Ultra Eco and Lotus Foods and Organic Valley, and the list goes on. You can check it out at osc2.org. And one of our initiatives was the Packaging Collaborative, along with the Climate and the JEDI, which is about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. But through the Packaging Collaborative, we were able to use and leverage all of these brands, plus so many other bigger brands, to really focus on what is it to create a regenerative packaging supply chain, so that we're not using petroleum, we're not using GMO, but we're using plant-based, non-GMO, compostable packaging. And NUMI was able to launch that just now over the last 3-4 months. It took us almost 15 years to create, but through the support of OSC and all these brands that are really trying to create a sustainable supply chain with packaging, because we know that we have that responsibility. I think every manufacturer's responsibility for their waste. We can't expect all the people who buy stuff to know what to do with the plastics or the cans. So the more we can create supply chains that can go right into our compost, or that simply don't have a lot of packaging. So those are the things we look at both internally and externally, from our own backyard to the rest of the world to our whole industry. And I feel those are the powers that we have as a business, and powers to create a regenerative model that, again, goes beyond our existence and goes into the future generations.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. There's like each one of these initiatives could be its own like deep dive session. Hopefully people have been seeing, I've been sharing resources, links to the organizations and initiatives that Ahmed and Amanda have been mentioning. We're also, again, Amanda is compiling what we're going to share out in a LinkedIn post, centralizing all of these resources as well. Couple of questions. Our time time together is so limited. If you have any questions that you'd like us to address, please do include them in the chat. Rosemary asked a really great question that I'd like to surface, and in fact, I'll include it in the chat here again, Ahmed and Amanda, so you can both see it. And it's about job creation. And given, I think the essence of this question here is, what is the role of regenerative business in intentional focus on local and inclusive job creation? Ahmed, I feel like that's something that you all are really focused on at Newbie. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we look at job creation as the sole, foundation for everything else to exist, because none of us can be on an island, and we all need each other to co-create. And even the example I gave of the following the 20,000 children here. Through that initiative of now delivering weekly organic produce, we have been able to hire so many of the people out of restaurant and cafes to now pack those produce into boxes to deliver. We've been able to work with hundreds of immigrant farmers that were out of business because they couldn't supply their produce to any of the restaurants and hotels and cafes. So for us, it's all about job creation through what is the lens of how are we taking care of the people on this planet along the way for this regenerative model. So for us, even at Numi Inc., constantly employing people over the last 21 years, and through the foundation and our farmers, we work with over 15,000 organic farmers and their families are such a strong part of how we work with the farmers to support the entire family. So for us, it's beyond just job creation. It's also how are we taking care of the families, because we feel a strong responsibility to all of the families of our employees and our farmers and the children that we work with. It's the ripple, because if it's a healthy family, it's a healthy person, and they can really show up at their jobs and feel present, similar to the water project. Just that initial health creates the ripples to really show up.
Beautiful, thank you. And I appreciate that question, particularly in the context of this conversation, because I feel like often when we think about regeneration, we think about in the context of ecosystem generation. And as Amanda shared at the beginning, we are not separate from nature, and the opportunity to regenerate communities and individuals is the very start of our role and opportunities as humans to be a beneficial species and allies to the natural systems upon which our lives and our businesses and our economies depend. So thank you for asking that question. Amanda, is there anything else that you want to add to that? We're coming up on the last 2 minutes of our session. I can't believe it. I do want to thank you all so much for chiming in. We're coming down to our final 2 minutes. I would love to ask both of you in your final call to action of this community of circular economy practitioners. What would be your call to action around putting these principles into practice in their own work, in their own organizations? Amanda?
Yeah, I think, as you're doing today, just keep on learning. This stuff is moving so quickly. The field is so large, you can't even keep track of everything anymore, which is a wonderful sign. And yeah, just to put out Buckminster Fuller Institute, we have a lot of different educational opportunities to invite you all to become members. If you go to BFI, Buckminster Fuller Institute, bfi.org, you can learn more there. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Ahmed?
Well, every voice counts right now, so we have to learn and collaborate and work with others to co-create. There's so many opportunities out there. As I mentioned, OSC2.org is a great platform where we have things on JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and the climate, as well as our collaborative and the packaging. But our choice, each choice we make every day really matters. So we can all make the smart choices that create positive ripples by being conscious and thoughtful on why we make those decisions.
Beautiful, beautiful closing. Thank you all so much for joining. I feel like we've just scratched the surface. Please do take a few minutes to share your feedback on this session, specifically in the survey that's pinned at the top. I love seeing that BFI is your role model for industrial symbiosis. Thank you so much to Amanda and Ahmed, not just for your time today, but for the work that each of you and your organizations are doing to bring planetary regeneration to life. It's been such an honor. Thank you all so much. We're off into what's next. Check out the reception tab, and thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you, Shana.
Thank you.